Well, so my name is Jean-Michel Bernard, and it's my pleasure to welcome for the very first number of the show my great friend, Mr. Jeff Rona. Here.
Hello, Jean-Michel. I'm so happy to see you. It's been a little while.
Exactly. And we are really happy with Pop Cinoche and UCMF to welcome you, because you are one of the most prominent and important person in the film music business since...
in this room. I'm the most important person in this room.
Yes, absolutely. And I see that you have a French synthesizer, which is just beside you. And
Oui, Arturia.
Arturia, so it's French. So it brings me to my first question. And I want to show you something. Everybody in the world of music knows very well. And it's this.
Oh, yes. It's a 40-year-old plug.
Exactly. And I know that most of musicians in the world, they don't know that you can be considered as maybe the king of MIDI somewhere. And
maybe first cousin.
First cousin. But you are at the very beginning of the big story, which made possible so many things concerning synthesizers and computers, of course. And at this time, it was some years ago, you were working as an engineer at Roland, right? And there were all the big brands like Oberheim or Roland, of course, and Dave Smith and Moog, of course, Bob Moog. And so there were a problem because everybody was working on their own project and their own synthesizers. And but the synthesizers were not able to work together, to talk together. So, and you had this meeting. I know what I'm talking about, you see. And there was this meeting with all the big brands, and you were just a very young engineer here, and you were in
just a kid.
Yes, you were in the middle of nowhere. And so this is my question. You are at the beginning of the MIDI, and could you explain us the story of this?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to. I was at the time a young musician trying to make some money, and I was already fascinated with electronic music. I had been using synthesizers, and I owned some, and doing experimental music and figuring out who I am as a musician. But to make some money, I got this job working at Roland, and I wasn't qualified. I lied to get the job. They said, "Do you know how to program computers?" I said, "Sure." And then I look it up. But I did okay. And just a few weeks after I started this job, which was to work on some other projects at Roland that had nothing to do with this, 2 engineers from Japan came to my little tiny office, which was just a little box at Roland here in Los Angeles. And they said, "We have something for you." And they brought me 2 electric pianos and prototypes, not ever released. And on the back was this plug that you just held up. And they said, yes, they said, "We want you to stop what you're doing, and we want you to help with this. We think this might be important." So I figured, I saw what they were doing. They showed me all the engineering notes for MIDI, and had not been released yet. It wasn't real. It was just an idea that people like Dave Smith and Yamaha and Roland, the engineers, said, we should do something as cooperation. And that led to this meeting. And the meeting was a private meeting, and I was there to represent Roland. But there was Bob Moog, Tom Oberheim, Roger Lynn, Dave Smith, who was, really one of the first people to suggest this, Cassio, Akai, probably about 10 people in a little room, tiny room again. And the discussion was, well, are we going to do something? And the answer was, well, yeah, we want to do something. And they said, and actually it was Tom Oberheim who said, well, I don't have time to run this. And Bob Moog said, I don't have time to run this. And Dave Smith said, I don't have time to run this. And they said, well, who could do it? I'd only had a job for like 2 weeks or 1 month. I had nothing to do. I'd already been told to stop everything. So I raised my hand. I said, I'll do it. And Oberheim says, great. Who the fuck are you? I had never met any of these people before. I knew who they were, but I never met them. I was scared out of my mind to be in this room with every brand name in the world. And so I said who I was. I said, I'm Jeff Rona. I'm working for Roland as a software engineer. And, I've already started working on this. And they said, great, there's a lot of work to do. And that's true. So for the next 10 years, really, off and on, I started the organization, and I was the person who created the way for us to collaborate. What would be the form of communication? Who was in charge? Who could vote yes? Who could vote no? I had to rewrite the MIDI document. I wrote the very first MIDI document, and I found all the mistakes, and I fixed them. And I worked with the engineers in Japan who wrote the very first MIDI document just for engineers. It was from engineers for engineers. And I started to spread it out. And I created a worldwide movement with pencil and paper. And sending letters, and email was still not happening yet, really. Sending faxes, sending telegrams to every developer. I would flip through music magazines looking for, obscure Italian synthesizer companies and sending them a note saying, I'm here doing this thing, MIDI, would you like to be a part? And it became what it became. It exploded. I think it's the most successful technical standard in history. How quickly it was created, how quickly it was accepted, how quickly it became universal around the world, and with almost no problems. No arguments, no lawsuits, no anger, and really very few technical mistakes. I can only think of one time that a very, very big company released a very good synthesizer, but when you move the pitch wheel up, the pitch went down because they didn't read the document correctly. So they had an upside down pitch wheel, which they fixed, and that was it. And from that time forward, the organization still exists, and it's run by some great people, and they have spent since 1984, they've spent the last 30-something years adding more power to it with time code and synchronization and machine control and lighting and mixing and video game control. And, MIDI is inside. There's MIDI in every phone in the world. There's MIDI code in every iPhone, in every Android phone, in every video game console. It's how they trigger sound effects, and then I left and I went back to doing what I wanted to do, which is writing music.
And you have been a part of history, in fact. So the funny thing,
a little part.
Yes, more than a little part, and the people, they don't know that you get one box for one synthesizer sold. So you see, I'm sorry, I have to say that.
Well, you know, actually, one of the things I was responsible for was deciding that MIDI would not have a patent, would not have a copyright or registration, and that nobody could make money from it. That it had to remain free and in the public control. And that's been the case ever since. I did meet the guy who made $1 off of every DX7, but Stanford University, John Chowning, who wrote the first technical paper on FM synthesis, and Yamaha bought the patent that the university had. Actually, the money went to the university, but I think they got millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars.
And he bought a castle in the south of France, I know.
I'm sure.
I know, but the funny thing is that I bought the Moog one 2 weeks ago, and which is really the one of the big synthesizers today's age. And you can find this behind. That's amazing. And of course, you have the new USB. But the thing is that all the people are always using this, and I have here a very old mois-ci 128 thing, and it's working since maybe 15 years or 20 years.
You know, one of the nice things about it is that you can have that plug, or you can just have USB, and it's still the same MIDI. It's just a different wire.
And it's exactly the same thing. It's not faster than the other one.
It is faster.
With the new one, with the USB, of course.
With USB, it's much, much faster. But it's the same code. It's the same everything. It just travels over a different wire. And yes, it goes much faster, which is great. But MIDI was designed that there's the software, and it's completely different than the hardware. And you can change the hardware and not change the software. And the software is the actual musical commands of play these notes and velocity and expression and pitch bend and all that stuff. That never has changed. Even in MIDI 2, which is coming out.
Yes, which is the new one.
You know, it doesn't change the fundamental structure of how MIDI works. It's still pretty much the same. It's just much, much better thought out for building bigger networks. For an individual composer, very little changes.
So, and the thing is that when you are today working with sound banks like, I don't know, Spitfire or VSL, you can use something which is really useful to make changes with the pitch wheel, of course, and the expression or vibrato or this kind of thing. And you are using something which is named CC. Which is something which is inside the MIDI, but this is exactly the same process.
Well, it's gotten much better with MIDI 2 because now you have pitch bend on every note instead of for the whole keyboard. And you have expression for every note instead of for the whole keyboard. And the resolution, the accuracy is much higher now. So it's still the same. Everything is fundamentally the same. And it's compatible with all the old instruments. But if you have a new instrument, you have now this more expressive control over each note is sort of its own little world in MIDI 2. It's super cool.
And you were able to add some MIDI on very old synthesizers, like the first Roland, which didn't have the plug with the MIDI. You could add after, like on Prophet 5, for example.
Yeah, and I remember there were some companies that came along in the early days of MIDI to create special boxes that would convert MIDI to Oberheim or some of the proprietary technologies that were existing. So Yeah, for a while there was a small industry of converting MIDI to old technologies, but MIDI became so accepted so fast that everything became MIDI within
Oh.
5 years. There was no such thing as an instrument without a MIDI plug.
I think that all the musicians can say thank you to Jeff. So each time you are,
They can say, well, now they could send me the $1.
yes, exactly.
€1.
I want it, please. Each time you plug something in your synthesizer, could you send just $1 to my friend Jeff Rona, because I think
Well,
that's
have them.
more.
They can send it to you, and I
Yes,
trust
sir.
that you can send it to me. But don't
So,
send
and-
it to me. Send it to Jean-Michel Bernard.
No, not to me, but
Care of-
no. And the funny thing is that now you are working with things like that. So of course you don't have anything. I'm trying to plug this, but it's not working. So this is. But you have a lot of colors. That's better than mine. And so the good thing is that you are using USB, but it's exactly the same process. And now we are looking for new technologies for trying to put more expression on instruments, electronic instruments like this, and now there are again new things, and so. But
well, that's a great thing, because that has MPE, and multi-channel pitch expression, or whatever it stands for, and really that is sort of halfway to MIDI 2.0. They took the concept from Rowley, and that every note has its own pitch bend. You can do vibrato, and you could play a chord and just do vibrato of the top note. It's really pretty amazing. And that board that you just held up really inspired the MIDI association to take more seriously adding another layer of expression.
So the thing is that we are not very intelligent as musicians, but you are very brilliant, because you are musician, composer, and engineers too. So
well, I'm not. I'm really a pretend engineer, Jean-Michel. I taught myself how to program computers for when I got the job at Roland, because I was excited to be close to technology, and I never expected it to get so carried away, to go so far. But I've never done it since, really. I've developed a few software plugins, but I don't write the code. I've designed a few instruments from my company, Wide Blue Sound, and we've put out 3 new contact-based synthesizers, and I designed the sound, the sound design of it, and the architecture of the synthesis, and it's been fun, and it's been very successful, and people really seem to like some of these ideas. So, but I think I'm finished. I'm really not as interested anymore in the development of new technology as I am in just making my music. Keeps me.
So, and we are going to the number 2, which is, of course, most important for you now. You are very well known as a composer working with synthesizers, but also with big orchestras. So you've made so many different things in your life. I can't believe it. So, so I'd like to talk with you about this, about your beginning, because you are a musician. You are playing a lot of flutes. We can see the flutes behind you. Okay, one, for example, this one. So, very nice.
Irish whistles.
Can you just play 2 notes? Just to see if you are able to.
I'm doing a movie for Netflix that's it's in Scotland.
So it's good for this. And there is a dog which is just behind you. So just watch out, because it could be dangerous. So I'd like to talk with you about this work you did in China some years ago. Remember this? And you were working for, was it a game or was it?
I've done 3 projects in China. I did the 2008 Olympics,
Which is
and that was
amazing.
that was a big orchestral
Yes, I remember.
project.
Very well.
And we did a tour. We took 2 orchestras and combined them and put them on airplanes and buses and went all through the country for the Olympics. I've done 1 video game in China that was kind of epic battle of gods fighting gods. And then I did a little romantic comedy last year for a Chinese company. And I'll be doing some more this next year in video games.
Yeah, because
I've done a few projects there.
And did you compete for the Olympics or no? No?
I did. I lost.
Okay. Sorry for you, but it's most important is to participate, as Mr. Bertin said.
You see, there's actually 4 awards. If you're the first winner, you get gold. Second winner, silver. Third winner, bronze. Fourth winner, you need to write the music.
And this is a good thing. And I want to talk with you about your story, because you are one of the founder of the remote control thing with Hans Zimmer, of course. And you are really at the beginning of the story of this. So could you explain us?
Yeah. After I left working at Roland, I became just a synthesizer programmer here in Los Angeles, and mostly working on pop records and working with pop producers. And so I worked on some records with Albie Galutin, who was the producer of the Bee Gees and the Eagles, if you remember them. And I worked for David Foster, who's David Foster.
Yes.
And I worked for quite a long time with Maurice White, who is
Really?
Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yes.
And I was part of that for a couple of years. And one project with Barry Gibb from the Bee Gees on a Diana Ross album. Anyway, so I started off working in the record industry, but eventually I was only working on film music. I was being hired by film and TV composers to make them cool because they didn't know anything about electronics, but I did. And then one day I get a phone call from actually a friend of mine who I knew from Roland, who had sold some samplers to this composer who just moved to Los Angeles. And he said, Jeff, I just met this composer, and I think you and he would be good friends, and I want to introduce you. His name is Hans Zimmer. And so I went over to meet Hans, and he knew about me a little bit from MIDI, and he knew about me working with Philip Glass and some other projects. And he had just come to LA. He'd had his first hit movie, which was Rain Man.
Yes, remember.
Because that movie, he scored it while he was in England, which is where he was living for many years, as a ghostwriter for other composers and jingles, a jingle composer. But after Rain Man, suddenly everybody was interested in hiring him. So he moved here. And we met within a few weeks of him moving to LA. And we became friends immediately. And we would stay up all night talking about synthesizers and music and who our favorite, producers were and all of that. And then I helped him out. I started helping him just doing sound design, synth programming, and a lot of sampling with him. And within a year or two, he decided to buy this building in Santa Monica, California, here in Los Angeles, and have room that it would be him and maybe a few friends. And I wasn't the first one to move in. I had just gotten married. I just had my first baby, and so I was working still from home. But about a year after my daughter was about 1 year old, and suddenly she didn't find me very interesting. Actually, she found me too interesting, and it started to be important for me to have a little bit of privacy. Hans said, well, I have a room here with your name on it. Come move in. And I did. And for the next 9 years, 8, 9, 10 years, we shared a studio together. And then John Powell came, and Harry Gregson Williams came, and Klaus Badelt came, and Mark Mancina came, and Trevor Rabin came, and Ramin Djawadi came, and Steve Jablonski came, and not all at the same time, but and some others. And then there were music editors, and then some music library people, and it started off as a great little world. It was a good place to escape reality, because everything that happened in that building was about making music, and the real world disappeared while you were there. Most of it.
Did you agree with him when he said video kills the radio stars?
Well, first of all, Trevor Horn said that, but it's nice to see Hans in the video wearing eye makeup.
Yes, with the big synthesizer behind him.
Yeah, actually, I think video did kill the radio star,
Right.
but MIDI killed the video star. So there.
Exactly. So you spent 9 years here working with him, doing things, and did you have the opportunity to work as a composer for a feature movie or?
Yes, so I helped Hans out on maybe 10 movies, not a lot, but I was all the time doing my own. I started in television, and Hans recommended me for one really important TV show, but I was actually friends with Mark Isham, the jazz trumpet player, and he and I started doing some projects together, and I helped him out on a couple of movies, and then we did a TV series together, and that also led to me getting more work. So 90% of everything I did working in the same building as Hans was not with Hans. It was just me doing my own thing. I'll tell you what was really nice was to be able to write a cue and think, I don't know if this is quite right. I'll ask John Powell what he thinks. I can knock on his door next door and have him come in, and I'll play him a cue. And he'll say, well, that works, but that's terrible. And the same with Hans. Hans Zimmer was always the first person to say, Jeff, come here, let me play you something. I don't know if this is good. And he'd play me something, and I'd say, well, maybe, but I'm not sure. What are you trying to do here?
It means everything.
And, honestly, if you said you don't get it, it doesn't work, he doesn't ask questions. He was never defensive. He would just redo it.
But when you are living in LA, you have to, it's the thing that young composers had to understand. In France, it's first a very difficult job, of course, and especially in LA, because in LA, all the composers from all over the world, they are joining here in LA, because the work is here, in fact, the big work and the big movies. So, and you worked on Gladiator, right?
That was one, yeah. That's where, yes. And that's where I met Lisa Gerard, and she and I did a movie together. We've done actually 3 or 4 things together. And we're still very good friends. And she lives in Australia.
You work with Steven Soderbergh on Traffic, too?
Yes. I met Cliff Martinez at a party, actually, and we became really good friends right away. And he had just done Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and Steve Soderbergh, it was such a big hit, Soderbergh said, well, we got to do some more things. So Cliff asked me to work with him on, well, we did a really bad TV movie together first, and it doesn't even matter. I don't even remember what it's called. We did a couple. And then Soderbergh had a movie called Kafka, one of the weirdest movies ever. And he just told us to go crazy with the music. and we did things that nobody would ever approve. No movie would ever say, "Oh, you sampled a pig and slowed it down. Great." We did all kinds of things. We sampled other film scores and flipped them backwards so you couldn't recognize them, but you had these great textures. And anyway, and then we did Traffic, and we've done a few things since then. I've helped him out on a little bit of TV, a couple of video games, but he's great. Cliff is such a brilliant composer and a great drummer.
Yes, and he has been very successful, of course, with Drive, which was a big hit. And,
yeah, that was a great score too.
And I think you have the same agent, right?
Yes, we do.
Always?
Actually, I came first, and then I introduced Cliff to my agent. And
so
they became good
please
friends.
tell John that we need to make a golf game together since a very long time. So my next time in LA in 2029, maybe, I don't know.
Well, it's funny because John lives where there are a couple of big golf courses, but the big one right near where he lives is the Trump International Golf Course.
So is it closed?
Palos Verdes, California.
Is it closed? No, not yet. It's stalled, I think, maybe. I don't know. So
I think it's still going.
Really? So it's a good thing for golf. So, and we met we met some years ago, and I was very interested because you are very used to go to the Cologne Festival, and
Cologne.
I saw how happy you were to transmit your knowledge to all the students here, and it was really interesting. And I know that you enjoy this very much. And even you made a concert. Yeah. You made a concert 3 years ago with Peter Gregson.
Peter Gregson, now on Deutsche Grammophon.
Yes, I know. I see the back.
I can't afford him anymore. Have you heard the album that Bach recomposed?
Yes.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is really surprising because I was not sure, but it was not, of course, a vinyl. But at the beginning, when you are listening to the suite in G, and you are listening many times, you say, "Oh, it's not like usual." So, and it changed a lot of things. But he's great, and he's a very wonderful musician. And so you were working with him for this concert, a great concert in Cologne, and you are used to come to the festival for talking about your work, and so which is really important for young composers because there are more and more composers in the world. And I think you will go maybe one day to. Did you go to Krakow Festival or not yet?
No, they've never invited me.
So you will be invited.
That's a hint, by the way. Tell them to invite me.
You have been to Ghent?
One time, only because John Powell got sick and couldn't go, and at the last minute they replaced. He called me up and said, "I can't go. You should go," and so I went. And then they called me and they said, "We have a problem. There's the jury for the festival. There's one person who can't come, and we need somebody to be on the jury. We'll upgrade your plane ticket to first class, and you have to stay one extra week, but you'll be treated like a king." And so I said, "Of course." And I had the best time at Ghent. This was in 2003, 4, long time ago.
Oh, with Jacques de Brulé at this time, the director of the festival, which is not here.
Yes, and the year that I was there, they gave the special award to George Martin.
Okay, so
and anyway, I had a good time. Did a lot of drinking with Pat Doyle.
But the thing is that we are not able to understand Patrick because he is speaking a very strange language. Of course, we are French. We are not good with language. But the thing is that when Patrick is talking, we don't need to understand what he's saying because he's so funny. He's the funniest guy in the world, I think, maybe. And
he's very funny. He and I saw each other in Cologne one year, and we got kicked out of the building. They asked us to leave. We got kicked out. There was a screening going on, and we were in the back making a lot of noise, laughing. And finally, somebody said, "I'm sorry, sir, you have to leave now."
I had the same experience with Patrick and Al Silvestri. And it was terrible.
Yeah, you know, I think you know this, but when I was a young composer, but already now busy with film and television, I was writing. Every month I would write an article for a magazine, a music magazine, about my experiences. And what was fun about writing these articles was that I was brand new to the business, so I could write about how something would go wrong and how I would fix the problem, and I could tell a joke about it and show that I was learning as I was going along. But look, I already was working with Hans Zimmer and Mark Isham and doing my own project. So I wasn't a kid. I was, starting to be a little bit successful. So I wrote these articles for many, many years. And then the publisher of the magazine said, well, we want to turn all of your articles into a book. We think it'd be a fun book. And they basically sent it to me. They said, well, what do you think? And I read through it and I thought, this makes no sense, because each article was like its own little world and it didn't connect. So I said, let me rewrite it. And they said, okay. And I actually spent about a year rewriting the whole thing. And I wrote the book, and it came out called The Real World, REEL, like film reel.
I remember this book very well now.
And that book is the reason that Cologne invited me to speak, and the reason the Aspen Music Festival had me come and give a master class every year, and NYU and a group in Amsterdam, a composers group that invited me to take the train from Cologne to Amsterdam. And I've met I'm sure if I hadn't written the book, you and I would not know each other.
Maybe. And so I know
that book to you.
No, but there are two reasons why you are going to Cologne each year. It's, of course, music and festival, and the schnitzel. We all know this. So the thing
well, I hear the schnitzel is good. I'm, as you know, Jean-Michel, I'm a vegetarian, and I've never actually eaten schnitzel, and I don't think that will ever change.
I know, but you like the word.
I love the word. And actually, Los Angeles is a very good schnitzel city.
Schnitzel city, absolutely. We can find a very good schnitzel, especially at the Capitol Studio. There is a little place when you are going inside, just on the left, you have Al Schmidt here, and there is a schnitzel shop just beside.
Yeah, there's probably 10 or 20 really good German restaurants in Los Angeles. And of course, you can't have a German restaurant without schnitzel.
Which is really good. And so now, because I would like to speak with you during hours and hours, but the thing is that, could you just talk about the changes now in the film music industry, and the thing that there are more and more work with, of course, the channels like Netflix, Amazon TV, Apple TV, etc. And what do you think of the future of the feature films in the theaters, and the thing that there are more and more series and beautiful ones with great composers, like the Queen's Gambit, for example, which is one of the best score I think this year.
Such a good score.
It is really, really great, and
it was so good it made me angry.
Yes, I know. And why not me? So this is always a question of the composer, why not him? Why did he hire this guy? And so what do you think about this? And it's a very good advice to young composers who are watching this, especially in France, of course, because we are in France.
Yes, you are in France. Well, I will say a few things. First of all, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can predict what's going to happen.
You?
No, not even me. Especially not me.
But you are an engineer.
So I think, first of all, because of the internet, it's less and less important where you live, and you can still find work. Almost all of my work isn't even happening in Los Angeles. I'm working on a Netflix movie that's being done in New York, and a video game that's happening in Japan. And my last documentary, the last 3 documentaries I've scored were all in Canada, and I've scored feature films in Brazil too, and so the whole world is spreading out, and there's so much more work now because filmmaking has gotten less expensive to do, and so there are so many more unique voices creating film. And I don't know what's going to happen with movie theaters after COVID is over. It might be that only the big Transformer movies and Avenger movies, happen in movie theaters, because right now all the good stuff is happening in television.
Like WandaVision,
and not just movies, but really, I mean, look at Queen's Gambit. It was a television series. And look at Dark from Germany, with an amazing score by Ben Frost, a German television series scored by a composer in England. And it just keeps, this is a story that keeps getting more and more. I think it's important to say, I think that the idea that I'm a film composer, I'm a TV composer, I'm a video game composer, and these are separate, and I only want to do this and I'll never do that, that's over. You're either a composer or you're not a composer.
Exactly.
And what difference does it make if it's for a game, a series, or a film? You're being hired to be creative, and you're being hired to be a good producer. And in my mind, those are equal. You have to write good music, but it has to sound great. You're not paid for what you write down. It doesn't matter what's on the paper or in your computer. It's what they hear coming through the speakers, which means it's your job to be a great producer. Why was Hans Zimmer so successful? His music was good, but he was a producer before he was a composer, and he knew. He understood mixing and synthesizers, and he worked with Trevor Horn and George Martin, so he had 2 of the best producers in the world showing him how to mix and how to record and how to use compressors, and his music just immediately sounded better than everybody else's. And the quality of the production creates emotion. A bad recording of a great piece of music is worse than a great recording of music that's mediocre. Sometimes a film score has to be incredibly simple. There are film scores that are a drone, an chord. But if it's beautifully and perfectly executed, perfectly produced, it creates that emotion in the audience, and that's what producers and directors want. So when I think about advice, it's this: know who you are, but that takes years. Learn how to produce, and you can do that watching YouTube. Really, there are no secrets anymore. There's no secret magic. you know, costs a little bit of money to buy a few plugins, but it's knowing how to use them. You could use the plugins that come with your sequencer, and you could probably produce a great score if you know what you're doing. So be a good producer, be a great producer, and surround yourself with really talented people. If it's going to be written for orchestra and you don't know how to write for orchestra, get a great orchestrator. You know, and again, I learned this from Hans, which is you surround yourself with people who are better at what they do than you are at what you do. So, you know, when he moved to Los Angeles, you know, he had, you know, he found Bruce Fowler as his orchestrator, who was a genius. And before him, it was Barbara. Oh, I'm forgetting her name. She was actually an incredible composer. I'm forgetting. She died many years ago. It'll come back to me. I apologize. It's an age thing. Every successful composer I've ever known has always brought the best talent they could to play, to mix, to program, to do whatever needs to be done. And think about yourself as the leader of the team. It's very hard to succeed alone by yourself. And it's not impossible, but everybody I know who has done well has people behind them who make the magic and make it sound amazing and make you look good, make you sound better than you really are. You know, you know that saying. There was a famous American writer named Mark Twain from 100 years ago who said, he said? Well, Wagner's music isn't as good as it sounds.
Yeah, but Mark Twain was very funny guy.
So he was making a joke, of course, but there really is something serious to that. So, you know, what young composers need to do is become great producers and great network people. You know, the other thing is every great director is online and you can write to them. They don't always answer you, but you know, film festivals are online now, and anybody can meet anybody if you figure out a good way to introduce yourself and not just say, "Hi, I'm a composer. You've never heard of me. I've never done anything. I want to do your next movie."
I can do anything.
That's a terrible thing to say, right?
I can do anything.
Yeah, I'll do anything. So I know what you were saying. There's more opportunities now than ever. There's also more competition for those jobs than ever.
Yes, more and more jobs because there are not a lot of work. In France, it's a bit different because in America, you are used to work with very different people, very talented people, and each in their own side, they are very good. So in France, it's a bit different because of first money, of course, because there are not a lot of money. So it's always difficult to get an orchestrator. And after, if you want to have a good mix, studio are expensive. So it's really a different approach. But the thing is
but you know, Jean-Michel, if you don't have any money, you can still find people who are looking for the experience. And it's risky, but just because somebody charges money doesn't mean they're good. It just means they have confidence, which is not a bad thing. But I have no doubt that somebody can create a great score for no money.
I agree completely.
There are people on the internet who are begging to mix your score for free. Send me your audio, send me your tracks, your stems, and let me mix. And you know what? Some of them are really good.
Really?
And just undiscovered.
I have a 3 hours thing, but I don't know how to begin. So can I send it to you now? With some schnitzel, of course.
Yes.
So my last question is concerning your future, and your future is your new album, which named how you say
Vapor.
So could you tell more about this, please?
Well, actually, it started off with Soundtrack Cologne in 5 years ago, 2016. 2015. They invited me to do a concert, a live show.
The concert we were talking about, I was there.
Yeah, with Peter.
Yes.
And I made the decision that I wasn't interested in doing a film score concert. I don't really feel like most of my music really works live. It either needs an orchestra or it needs very careful technology, and I just wasn't interested. So I proposed this idea that I would do a concert, but do it of just music that I wanted to write. And they said, we'll do it. And so they gave me a place, and I thought, well, shit, I better write something. So I wrote an album of music, and I had Peter Gregson, the British cellist, and David Julian, the British composer who also plays sort of experimental guitar, and one young German guitar player perform with me, and we did this project, and I called it Projector. And at the end after the concert, I went home and I polished the record and released it not until at the very end of 2017. And that's the first album I ever did of music that was not a score, not a soundtrack album. And you know what? I loved it.
I'm sure.
So I started another album. Something to just to be able to do things that would never fit in a movie. And then we had COVID and we had quarantine. And the record that the second album I'd been working on, I needed a full orchestra. And I was already talking with an orchestra here in LA, and then they shut down all the studios. So I put that album in a box, put it on the shelf. And I was starting to work more with my modular synthesizers. And because I was trapped at home, I just started doing a thing where every Saturday morning I would get up, come down to my studio, which is in the basement, in the bottom of my house, and I would improvise on that for a few hours. And I would record it in multi-channel into my sequencer. And I did it I did it more than once a week, and I created probably 20 interesting improvisations. And then I had them, in my computer, and I started to edit and refine and add a little bit, but mostly it's that. But there's things I've added. And then I decided the album I liked it. So I decided that this would actually be my second album. In the meantime, I've recorded the orchestra for what will now be my third album, which I'll release maybe later this year. I'm still mixing it and adding a little bit to it, but it's finished. But this album, Vapor, is more experimental, a little more introverted, a little more inside, a little darker. But it was just my chance to be a little more experimental. And it will come out March 5th, on a great little record label here in Los Angeles called Alpha Pup. Like the little dog. Yeah. Alpha Pup. And it's actually a very important record label here in Los Angeles. And so I was very pleased that they liked the album. So, my job is still scoring things, movies, TV, games. But to have these other projects, and look, I'm very inspired by you, Jean-Michel, that you have this life outside of just doing things that a director tells you to do. Make it funnier, make it sadder, make it longer, make it shorter, make it grow, make it shrink. You know, that's a very reactive life. Yeah.
Yes,
It's a very reactive life.
I think it's really important because, and I'm telling this to my students when I was teaching, and there is a life beside being a film composer. So it's very important to have your own life with your project, like you did. And it's not easy because you are using modular synthesizers, which get no presets. So each time you are doing the sound, you have to record it because after it's over.
That's right. And that's why I called it vapor. You know, it's a cloud of gas. You can see it, but you can't touch it.
Exactly.
And once it's gone forever.
I listened to one or two pieces and it was really great. I love this. So, and now we are at the end because you see, we are 1 hour of talk, and I'm sure we could use the complete interview for other things. So, but we are really happy to have you in this number one show because it's really important, especially for young composers in France, to have advice from you and know more about your life, the fact that you are the king of MIDI, and you are. But I want just to say one thing. You are not only amazing musicians, you are just an amazing human being. And I'm really lucky enough to have you as a great friend in my life. And
you're one of my very favorite people in the world, Jean-Michel.
So
I've never met anybody like you.
That's better for you, maybe. So
well, I will say that one is enough.
Yes, one is enough. So, and we love dogs.
But less than one would be a tragedy. I'm Jeff Rona. I'm a composer here in Los Angeles, and I want to say thank you to UCMF and Pop Cinoche for having me on the show with my dear friend, the brilliant Jean-Michel Bernard.